Welcome back to Huskborne Horrors, tales born from the depths of husk and horror. Tonight, we descend into the silent, fluorescent-lit world of those who watch when the rest of us sleep. Security guards walk lonely halls, monitor forgotten cameras, and patrol empty grounds. But sometimes, they aren't as alone as they think. These 10 real stories come from night shift guards who witness things they were never meant to see. Turn the lights down, and let's begin. I worked the night shift as a security guard in a corporate building in downtown Chicago. The kind of place with marble floors, motion-sensing lights, and motivational posters that try a little too hard. My shift ran from midnight to 8 a.m., and for the most part, it was just me and my monitor bank, watching people do absolutely nothing. The building had 20 floors above ground and 2 sublevels, B1 for maintenance and electrical, and a parking level that nobody ever used anymore. I'd walk my rounds twice a night and spend the rest glued to the cameras, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and trying not to fall asleep. It was during my 3rd week when something strange happened. Around 3:12 a.m., I'll never forget the exact time, I saw elevator number 3 activate on its own. Now that wasn't too weird at first. Sometimes one of the cleaning crew accidentally hit the call button on a different floor, or the system would just glitch. But I checked the live feed. There was no one on any of the upper floors. Every office was empty. The elevator rose from the basement, B1, all the way to the 19th floor. The doors opened, stayed open for about 10 seconds, then closed. No one stepped in. No one stepped out. Then it began to descend. That's when things got weird. It passed B1 and kept going. The digital panel showed B2. That doesn't exist. There's no B2 on the building plans. I know because I asked our maintenance guy about it on my first day. He told me, jokingly, if you end up in B2, you'll want to stay there. Less paperwork. We both laughed. I figured it was just a running gag. But that night, B2 showed on the monitor, clear as day. I flipped over to the basement feed trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was messing around. But the camera glitched, just a smear of static and horizontal lines. It only lasted a few seconds, but when it cleared up, the elevator had returned to the ground floor. I didn't hear the ding at first, but then the doors slid open. I looked toward the lobby from my little security office, glass windows facing the main entrance, and saw the elevator was empty. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and walked slowly over. The lights in the elevator were flickering slightly, and there was this wet trail, like someone had walked out dripping water, not just a few footprints. It was as if someone had soaked clothes and then walked around the marble floor. But the trail didn't go anywhere. It just stopped. 5 or 6 feet outside the elevator, like they evaporated. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No response. Then, back at my station, I saw movement on the monitors. The lobby cam had gone fuzzy for a second, then showed a tall shape, human-like, but off. It was wearing what looked like a business suit, but it had no visible features. Just a smooth, static-like texture across where a face should have been. It walked across the screen, and then the camera went black. At that point, I was trying to rationalize it. Bad feed, camera glitch, maybe a prank, maybe a maintenance worker screwing around. But then the lights flickered in the hallway outside my office, and my radio, usually dead silent, crackled to life. A voice, garbled, whispering something. I couldn't make it out at first, so I pressed the call button and asked, Dispatch, come again? More static. Then I heard it clearly. B2, don't look. That was it. I froze. My heart pounded. I knew I should report it. But to who? No one else was in the building. No one else even believed there was a B2. I sat in my chair, staring at the monitors, every hair on my body standing on end. Eventually, the lights returned to normal. The elevator reset to L for lobby. The rest of the shift dragged on like a nightmare. I didn't leave my station again until the sun came up. The next night, elevator number 3 stayed offline. Maintenance claimed it was a mechanical error. But when I asked what had happened, the guy just shook his head and muttered something about the system calling floors it shouldn't. A week later, I turned in my badge. I told them it wasn't the right fit. I still don't know what B2 is, but I know this. If a building ever tells you it has one fewer floor than it really does, don't be the one who tries to prove otherwise. A few months ago, I took a private security gig that paid way too well, $1,200 for just 2 overnight shifts. No weapons required, just keep an eye on the place. The catch? It was at the infamous Ashford Mansion. The estate sits on 200 acres in the New England countryside, isolated and rotting from years of abandonment. Built in the late 1800s by old money industrialists, it's valued at over $14 million. But no one wants it. Not since Henry Ashford's wife vanished inside in 2009. One minute she was in the solarium, the next gone. No sign of a struggle, no forced entry, just a hot cup of tea and a missing woman. Henry tore the place apart looking for her. Then he vanished from public life, and the house sat empty ever since. The owners hired my company to make buyers feel better about touring it. Visible security presence, they said. The first night wasn't too bad. A little eerie, sure. The floors creaked, the lights flickered. The place had that heavy, silent pressure like something was always listening. My rounds took me through the ballroom, the upstairs gallery, the library, and the solarium. The second night, that's when everything changed. At 2:30 a.m., I heard piano music drifting through the halls, soft, deliberate, almost like a lullaby. There was a piano in the ballroom, but I'd locked the door earlier. I radioed dispatch. Static. Just a faint hiss like breathing. When I got to the ballroom, the door was somehow unlocked. I opened it slowly. The music stopped. The piano's lid was open, and a single ivory key was held down. I leaned in to see what was on it. A porcelain tooth. I backed out fast and returned to my station, but the camera feeds were frozen. Every monitor showed the same thing, me standing at the front door at 12:03 a.m., but it wasn't 12:03. It was closer to 3. Then a motion alert triggered in the West Wing, the solarium. As I approached, the temperature dropped. My breath misted, and that scent hit me. Jasmine. Sharp and too sweet. According to a case file I read in the mansion's old security binder, that was the perfume Mrs. Ashford always wore. The solarium door was slightly open, the glass inside fogged over from the cold. That's when I saw her. A woman in a pale blue dress stood with her back to me, staring out the windows. But there was no reflection in the glass. None. I called out, "Ma'am?" She didn't turn. She just started humming. That same lullaby from the piano. I blinked. She was gone. But the humming continued, louder now, right by my ear. I ran. I didn't even think. I left the radio, the keys, everything. I got in my car and didn't stop until I saw city lights. The company called me the next day. I didn't answer. I heard they replaced me with another guard. He lasted 2 nights. Checked himself into a psych ward saying, "The walls won't stop whispering." That mansion, it isn't empty. It never was. And if someone offers you good money to watch something everyone else avoids, you better ask why they want you to stay, and who, or what, they're hoping stays with you. I've worked as a night security guard for almost a year now, at a shipping yard just outside of Detroit. The kind of place people forget exists. Rows of rusty metal containers stacked like tombstones, the echo of wind whistling between them, and the constant hum of distant industrial noise. The job is simple. Monitor 16 camera feeds, patrol the yard once an hour, and make sure no one's trying to steal copper wiring or bust open containers for scrap. I've never minded the isolation. In fact, I've always preferred it. Until a couple of weeks ago, when something changed. There's this one camera that always made me feel uneasy. Camera 12. It monitors the farthest section of the yard. Zone 12, we call it. But the other guards jokingly call it the graveyard. That zone hasn't seen activity in years. It's where all the forgotten, outdated, or permanently sealed containers get dumped. Some of them are so old, the codes stenciled on them are from companies that no longer exist. And yet, despite how dead that area is, I've always gotten this weird feeling whenever I looked at its feed, like I was being watched from the screen. That night, around 2:45 a.m., I noticed the feed on camera 12 flicker. Not unusual, our system's a little outdated, and cold weather sometimes causes brief glitches. But when the image cleared, there was someone standing in the yard. A tall figure, at least 6 feet, right between 2 old shipping containers near the back of the zone, motionless, facing the camera. My first thought was that someone had snuck in. We've had our share of scavengers, usually homeless folks or teenagers trying to film ghost hunting TikToks. But the gate hadn't opened. No motion sensors had gone off. And I'd just walked that area 30 minutes prior. It was empty then. The figure didn't move. I watched it for at least a minute, waiting for some sign of motion, blinking, shifting, even breathing. But it just stood there, unnaturally still. I picked up the radio and called dispatch. But all I got was static, not even a click. I tried again. Nothing. Reluctantly, I grabbed my flashlight and keys, stepped out of the office, and began walking toward Zone 12. The moment I opened the door, I noticed how still the air was. No wind, no rustling. The usual hum of machinery was gone. Even the sound of my own boots on gravel seemed muted. When I got to Zone 12, I swept my flashlight across the rows of containers. Empty. I checked every row I could, even climbed up onto a stack to get a better look. Nothing. No one. Not even footprints in the frost-covered gravel. But when I returned to the office and looked back at camera 12, the figure was still there. Only now, it was closer. Roughly 15 feet closer to the camera. Same stance. Same eerie stillness. I blinked, leaned in, rewound the footage. There was no transition, no movement. It hadn't walked. It had jumped. One frame, it was in the back. The next, much closer, as if it skipped time. That's when it moved. Its head tilted slightly to the left, like it was curious, or listening. Then, as if on cue, the lights in the office flickered, and every single camera feed glitched, all except camera 12. That one stayed perfectly clear. And now, the figure was right in front of the lens. Its face, or what should have been a face, was a blank void. No eyes, no mouth. Just a dark outline of a head and shoulders. inches from the camera, staring. Then the feed cut to black, and that's when I heard the footsteps. Software. Slow. Coming from just outside the office. Gravel crunching under deliberate steps. I grabbed my flashlight, heart hammering in my chest, and approached the door. The footsteps stopped. Then the doorknob jiggled, just once. I threw the door open and shined my light out into the yard. Nothing. No one. The cold hit me like a wave, and I realized I was shaking. I stepped outside, did a full sweep with the light. Still nothing. When I turned back toward the monitors, every camera feed was slowly returning, one by one. I watched them pop back online like someone flipping a switch. All of them except camera 12. That one stayed black. I stayed inside the rest of the night. Didn't move. Barely breathed. When the sun came up and the day shift arrived, I told my supervisor everything. He brushed it off at first, said maybe I was tired or imagining things. But when he pulled the camera logs, his face changed. Camera 12 had gone completely dark at 2:43 a.m. No footage, no system errors, no signs of tampering, just 4 hours of blank space in the logs. Nothing. 3 nights later, I was off duty. Around 3:02 a.m., I got a text from Tony, the new guy covering my shift. It just said, "Yo, who's the guy in Zone 12?" He didn't come back after that. Neither did I. Back in 2019, I worked as an overnight security guard for a small-town high school in Missouri. Yeah, I know. Why does a school need a night guard? Turns out the district had a string of break-ins, vandalism, some stolen equipment. Nothing supernatural. At first. The school was old, built in the 50s. Brick walls, long echoing hallways, and creaky floorboards that always sounded like someone was following you. The layout was like a maze, especially the lower levels. There was a whole wing of old classrooms and storage areas beneath the gym that hadn't been used in decades. They told me to lock up by 11, do a sweep of the hallways every 2 hours, and watch the cameras in between. Easy money. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I started my second patrol. Everything was quiet, but as I passed the main stairwell leading down to the old locker rooms, I noticed something off. A locker door was open. Just one. Now, the lower level was supposed to be sealed. No students, no staff, not even janitors used it anymore. The hallway lights down there were motion activated, but only the first row was dimly lit. Everything beyond was pitch black. I figured maybe one of the kids snuck down and left it open earlier. Still, something about it made me stop. I walked down the stairs, my flashlight sweeping over rows of dusty blue lockers. Most were dented, rusting, their locks long removed. But the one that was open, locker 313, looked untouched. Pristine, almost. Like it had been installed yesterday. Inside was nothing. No books, no bag. Just a small sticker on the back wall. It read, "He waits when you look away." I laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. Urban legend nonsense. Still, it stuck with me. I closed the locker, did another sweep, and went back upstairs. At around 3:05 a.m., I was sitting in the office reviewing footage when camera 6, the feed that covers the hallway by the stairwell, glitched. Just a brief static burst. When it cleared, the locker was open again. Locker 313. I rewound the footage. There was no movement. The door didn't swing open. It just jumped from closed to open. I grabbed my flashlight again, trying to tell myself it was just a faulty hinge or a draft. But when I got there, the hallway lights didn't come on. I walked into total darkness. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, my flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then it went out completely. I smacked it against my palm and it buzzed back to life. When I lifted it, there was someone standing at the end of the hallway. He wasn't facing me, just standing with his back to me, motionless. I froze. "Hey," I called. "You're not supposed to be down here." No response. He didn't move. I took a step forward, heart pounding in my chest. The light flickered again. When it came back, he was gone. Just gone. I ran to the end of the hallway. Nothing. I checked every room, every stairwell, empty. Back in the office, I fast-forwarded the camera feed. The locker opened again at exactly 3:13 a.m. I watched the timestamp. At 3:13:06, a shadow stretched across the hallway floor. Just a long, slender silhouette crawling out of the locker. I slammed the laptop shut. For the next few nights, I avoided going down there. But the locker kept opening, always around 3:13 a.m., and sometimes I'd hear footsteps above me or below, even though the building was locked tight. One night, a substitute guard was filling in for me. I didn't say anything about Locker 313. I didn't want to sound crazy. He quit after one shift, left a note on the desk. "Whoever's inside that locker isn't human." After that, I put in my notice. But here's the part that still messes me up. I went back a year later to drop off some paperwork for a different job. The school was still running. Kids everywhere, same old brick walls and echoing hallways. Out of curiosity, I peeked downstairs. The entire hallway was sealed off with fresh drywall and locks. But on the wall beside it, just above where Locker 313 would have been, someone had spray-painted, "Don't look away." It was supposed to be a one-night job. That's what they told me when I took the security gig at the old factory. The place had been closed for years. No one was supposed to be there. Just a simple assignment. Watch over the building while they prepared for demolition the next day. The factory had been abandoned for over a decade. It sat on a hill just outside of town, hidden behind trees and weeds. I'd passed it countless times, but never really paid attention. From the outside, it was just a rundown industrial building. Broken windows, rusted doors, and walls covered in grime. The pay was good for a night's work, so I took the job, even if something felt off. I arrived at dusk, met the foreman, and was given instructions. Lock up, patrol every hour, and monitor the security system. Simple. The foreman warned me about strange noises at night, but I didn't think much of it. He left with his crew, and I was alone. As night fell, the air seemed to change. The factory, surrounded by trees, felt like it was breathing. The security system powered up, and I started my rounds, walking through the main factory floor, where broken machinery stood in the shadows. The place was unnervingly silent. Not the quiet of an abandoned building, but a suffocating silence. I went through the hallways, flashlight cutting through the dark. The farther I walked, the more I felt something watching me. Every step echoed louder than the last. Around midnight, I decided to check the lower levels. The elevator had been out of service for years, but there were stairs leading to what looked like a basement. The door creaked open, and a chill ran through me. The air was colder down there. I stepped onto the cracked concrete and shone my light on rows of dusty shelves, old crates, and broken machinery. But then, I saw something unusual. In the corner was a metal door, newer than the rest of the building. It looked like a high security door. I walked over, curiosity creeping in. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. Behind it was a small room with a pedestal at the center. On top of the pedestal sat a glass case. Inside the case was a small mechanical device covered in strange symbols. It felt oddly familiar. A low hum filled the room, so faint I almost didn't hear it. The air thickened, colder. I stepped back, suddenly realizing how wrong everything felt. The room, the object, the factory. It all felt wrong. As I turned to leave, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside. I rushed to the security room and checked the monitors. The feed from the lower levels was static. When I checked the main floor camera, I froze. In the distance, by the large front windows, there was a figure. A man, his face hidden by a dark hood, standing still like a mannequin. I grabbed the radio, but there was no response. The air grew heavier. I could feel eyes on me from somewhere. I had to get out. I sprinted down the hallway toward the exit. But as I reached the stairs, the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Don't leave." Ignoring it, I pushed through the door at the bottom of the stairs. But as soon as I stepped outside, everything stopped. The factory, the trees, the sky. It was frozen, like time had stopped. I glanced back. The man at the window was gone. But when I turned around, the figure stood right behind me. The man in the hood. I couldn't move. He stepped closer, and everything went black. The next morning, I woke up in my car, parked outside the factory gates. The factory looked the same, old, run down, and abandoned. The police were called when I failed to show up for my shift. But when they arrived, they found nothing. The factory was empty, and nothing had been disturbed, except for the humming sound. Workers said it came from deep inside the building, growing louder as they prepared for demolition. I never went back. But when I close my eyes, I hear that whisper, "Don't leave." I never expected to be stationed at the steel tower on the outskirts of town. The place had been an old communication facility, abandoned for years, and now used only occasionally for military-grade communications. My job was to monitor the equipment, make sure everything was secure, and ensured nothing went wrong. The tower was an odd, imposing structure in the middle of nowhere, and I figured it would be a quiet, uneventful shift. But things took a strange turn one night. I arrived at dusk, greeted by a cold, lifeless atmosphere. The tower stood tall against the setting sun, casting long shadows over the barren landscape. The off-duty guard, an old man who had worked there for decades, handed me the keys and gave me a warning. "Whatever you do, don't go near the south entrance." I laughed it off. He was just another paranoid old guy, right? But his face was serious. "There's a reason it's always locked. Trust me." I nodded, took the keys, and got to work. The first few hours passed without incident. I monitored the control room, listening to the low hum of the equipment. The only sound was the wind against the steel walls. It felt like a ghost town, as though time itself had stopped. Around midnight, the lights flickered. It was brief, just enough to make me glance up. I thought it was a glitch, but when I checked the security cameras, something caught my eye. The south entrance gate was open. I frowned. It shouldn't have been. I zoomed in on the cameras, trying to make sense of it. A figure was standing just beyond the gate, facing away from the camera. It was hard to tell who or what it was, but there was no reason for anyone to be there. I tried calling the radio, but it was silent. My heart began to race. Something wasn't right. I left the control room and made my way toward the gate. The air had grown colder, and the wind had picked up. The path was eerily quiet. No animals, no sounds, just the crunch of my boots on the gravel. When I reached the gate, I stopped dead in my tracks. There was no one there. Confused, I scanned the area. The gate was open, but there was no sign of anyone. The dirt path leading up to it was undisturbed, no footprints, no signs of movement. I checked the lock. It was secure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Suddenly, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps coming from behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. I shone my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, but the area was empty. My heart hammered in my chest, and I started to head back to the control room. Then I heard it again. The footsteps were closer now. I turned around, and that's when I saw him. A man, tall and gaunt, standing at the corner of the building. His face was hidden behind a dark, cloth-like mask. He didn't move. He just stared at me. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled for the radio. Still nothing. I bolted for the control room, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking as I checked the cameras again. The man was still there, standing motionless by the corner. But now, something had changed. His head tilted slightly, as though he was waiting for something. My blood ran cold. The cameras were glitching, but I could still see his figure unmoving, growing closer with every passing second. Then the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back on. The entire tower plunged into darkness, and I felt a wave of panic sweep over me. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. The backup lights were weak, barely illuminating the room. It felt like I was trapped in a void. And then I heard it. "Go!" The whisper sent a chill down my spine. It was a soft, rasping voice, almost like a breath at my ear. I didn't wait for anything else. I grabbed my keys, sprinted for the exit, and didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were shaking, and my breath came in short gasps. I didn't dare look back. The next day, I went back to the tower to collect my paycheck, but the off-duty guard was nowhere to be found. When I spoke to the higher-ups, they claimed nothing unusual had happened. But when I picked up my check, the old guard I had spoken with earlier was there. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't go back," he said, his voice low. "It knows." I never returned to the tower. Whatever had been there, it's still there, waiting, watching, and I'll never face it again. It was a typical quiet night at the abandoned industrial complex. Jake and I were the only security guards on duty, and we'd been working here for months. The place had been shut down for years, but the owners still paid us to patrol the perimeter and keep an eye on things. It was mostly uneventful. That night, we had just finished our rounds inside the building when our supervisor, Bill, told us to check the perimeter. It was part of the routine, just to make sure no one was trespassing. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across the cracked concrete as we walked through the overgrown yard. "Why does it always feel like something's watching us out here?" I muttered, half joking. Jake chuckled. "You're just paranoid. It's nothing but weeds and rusted metal." But there was something different about tonight. The usual sounds, the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of leaves were missing. It was unnervingly silent. As we walked past the corner of the building, I noticed movement in the shadows. A group of men stood near the edge of the property, talking in low voices. Something about them didn't sit right with me. "Let's just keep walking," Jake said, trying to sound casual, though I could tell he was tense too. We tried to ignore them, but one of the men stepped forward as we got closer. "Hey," he said, his voice low and threatening. "What are you two doing out here?" Jake squared up, trying to act tough. "We're security. This is private property. You need to leave." The man smiled, but it wasn't friendly. His eyes were too wide, his grin too sharp. The others stepped closer, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "We don't take kindly to people poking around," the man said, his smile growing. "Especially not at night." My heart began to race. I glanced at Jake, but he didn't seem as confident now. He reached for his radio, but before he could speak, the man lunged forward, grabbing him by the arm. I tried to pull Jake free, but the other men were on us in an instant. One of them grabbed my wrist, and another yanked Jake's flashlight out of his hand, smashing it on the ground. "Don't call for help," the man sneered. "No one's going to come." I struggled, but they were too strong, and there were too many of them. We were pulled away from the building, deeper into the yard. That's when I heard it. A growl, deep and guttural, echoing in the distance. I froze, looking around, and then I saw it. A massive creature, black as night, emerging from the shadows. Its eyes burned like coals, and its claws scraped against the ground. The men recoiled, fear flashing across their faces. One of them whispered something under his breath, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. The creature wasn't interested in talking. It was interested in blood. In a blur, the creature lunged, its claws slicing through one of the gang members in a single, brutal swipe. The others scattered, but the creature was faster. It moved with inhuman speed, grabbing another man and dragging him into the darkness. Jake and I were too stunned to move. The sounds of the men's screams echoed in the night air, but we couldn't tear our eyes away from the creature. Its glowing eyes turned to us, and for a moment I thought we were next. "Run!" Jake yelled, snapping me out of my trance. We bolted, racing back toward the building as the creature continued to hunt down the remaining men. We didn't stop until we reached the security office, slamming the door behind us. We locked it, both of us breathing heavily. "What the hell was that?" Jake gasped. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking, "but we're never going back there again." The creature didn't follow us. By the time we looked back, the yard was empty, save for the bloodstains left behind. But I knew something had changed. We had seen something that night, something not of this world, and I wasn't sure if we'd ever be the same. I've been a security guard at the Crestwood Hotel for over a year now. It's a grand, once pristine establishment that now stands on the edge of decay. The chandeliers in the lobby still gleam with a certain elegance, and the carpets in the halls, though worn with age, still hold a faint glimmer of their former opulence. The hotel is a relic of another time, and while its high-profile guests and lavish events have dwindled, I've seen it all. At night, the place is almost abandoned, with only a few stragglers checking into their rooms late. The emptiness is always unsettling. But as much as the hotel feels abandoned, it's not. There's something still here, a presence I can't quite explain. It's the strange noises that echo through the halls when no one's around. The flickering lights, the doors that creak open and shut by themselves. I've brushed these off, chalking them up to old plumbing, maybe even the building settling. But deep down, I know there's something more to it. That night, I was on the graveyard shift, alone in the dead quiet of the hotel. The night manager, Karen, called me to her office around midnight. She handed me a small, old-fashioned key, its brass gleaming in the dull light. "There's a room upstairs that needs to be checked," Karen said. Her voice sounded strange, hesitant, almost like she was reluctant to even mention it. "Room 1337. It hasn't been used in years. The owners want to inspect it before renovations. Just check it out and make sure nothing's changed. I frowned. Room 1337, never heard of it. Why's it been sealed off? Karen's lips tightened. Let's just say it's complicated. You don't need to worry about the details. Just check it, okay? The key felt heavy in my hand. There was something about the way Karen was acting that unsettled me. But I nodded, not wanting to press further. I took the elevator up to the top floor, where room 1337 was located. The ride felt longer than usual, the elevator groaning with each floor it passed. When it reached the top, the doors opened to a dimly lit hallway that seemed untouched by time. The air was thick with dust, and the silence felt heavy, like the whole floor was holding its breath. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing off the walls. There were no lights, except for the faint glow of a few scattered lamps that barely illuminated the passage. The floorboards creaked beneath my boots as I neared the door to room 1337. It stood at the end of the hall, isolated from the rest of the rooms, its number engraved in gold on the door. The door looked old, the wood worn and cracked with age. I took the key from my pocket, slid it into the lock, and turned. The door groaned as it opened, revealing a room frozen in time. It was dim inside, with the only light coming from the small window that let in the faintest glow of moonlight. I stepped in, the air feeling cold and musty, as if the room had been locked away for decades. Dust covered every surface, and sheets were draped over the furniture like ghosts of the past. The bed was large, the frame carved from dark wood, but it seemed to sink under the weight of age. The room smelled faintly of something old, something that hadn't been touched in years. As I moved farther into the room, my flashlight beam swept over the furniture, the paintings on the walls, the old bookshelves. Everything was covered in a layer of dust. It was as if the room had been forgotten. But the most unsettling thing of all was the mirror. A large, antique mirror stood opposite the bed. The frame was intricately carved with patterns that seemed almost too detailed, too lifelike. I walked toward it, feeling an odd sense of foreboding. As I approached, the reflection of the room in the mirror seemed wrong. The air felt thicker around it. The furniture seemed to warp in the reflection, and I thought I saw something move in the corner of the mirror. Just a flicker, but enough to make my skin crawl. I stepped back quickly, but then I heard it. A soft whisper, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. "Leave." My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, my eyes darting through the room. There was no one there. Just the dusty furniture, the curtains swaying slightly in the breeze from the cracked window. I quickly moved to the door, but when I tried to leave, the handle wouldn't budge. I tugged harder. The door was locked. I pulled and twisted the handle, but it refused to open. Panic began to set in. My breath became shallow and my hands began to sweat. That's when I heard it again. The whisper, louder this time, almost urgent. "Leave now." If you enjoyed tonight's tales, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Huskborne Horrors. Join us as we uncover more stories from the deepest corners of fear and the darkest shadows. Remember, every house has a history, and every legend has a hidden truth. Tales born from the depths of husk and horror. Stay tuned, and until next time, keep your lights dim and your doors locked. You never know what's lurking just beyond the darkness.